Hi, it's Chris with Implied Music, and this is part two of the drumming on the piano video series. And there probably could be 100 parts of that because piano is a percussion instrument. It's a string instrument and a percussion instrument. Well, we looked at Steve Reich's technique from Runner, 2016 piece. And a number of people said, hey, do part two. We want to know more about that. I took some of the ideas from that first video and extended them, made a little piece. Let's take a look at it. So I'm a young composition student in probably 1979. And Steve Reich came to my school. And I was able to be like kind of a gopher for his residency. So during the week, I pestered him with questions. And I was also a major fanboy. I was effusive, and I'm sure embarrassed myself. I'm glad there's no video of everything. One of the things he said, though, that has stuck with me is, I invite you to examine the score. Composers don't always explain their thinking. The music is the explanation in a way. In fact, music is a little bit past what we can actually speak about, isn't it? But we can look at specific notes and some specific ideas. Let's take a look at this piece that I've written. It draws on some of the ideas from Runner and also some of the ideas from Music for 18 Musicians, as well as a nice solid 4-on-the-floor drum beat. Should we play it? I'll play a little bit of it. A little introduction, just to get a sense of the color. And here you can see that drumming pattern in blue on the piano. And you can probably also hear pulsing woodwinds. That's really from Music for 18 Musicians. And then a mallet instrument as well. Let's talk about the bits and pieces, and then we'll run through the entire thing. Well, I've got the keyboard poking out of the bottom of our screen here, and I just want to talk about the schemes that we're interested in. Remember, we said, let's grab a handful of notes, a scale, 7 tones, and shift them from mode to mode, from scale to scale. Big transpositions. The first mode that I chose was derived from the G major scale, and I actually am playing it A to G. This is the Dorian mode, but I'm really thinking of it as the collection of notes that's G major. And that's what I used when I went over here to my scale quantize function and said, quantize those selected notes to G major. Right now it's set to G sharp melodic minor because that's one of the systems that I used. So the very first set of notes, is A to G. That's the first one. The second set of notes that I chose was the major scale from E flat to E flat. And what that means is this, and look at it as it appears on the keyboard, and we can also look at it as it goes by on the screen later. Now, I'm going to have to adjust a bunch of these pitches. In the key of E flat, A is A flat, B is B flat, C is still C, D is still D, E is E flat, F sharp turns into F. And so I now have this set of pitches. They are the same letter names, but I've adjusted them to conform to the scale. Those are the notes from the G major scale, A to G. Those are the notes in the E flat major scale, A flat to G. And then I went back. I thought it sounded nice to go between the two. Well, I used 4 different scales. The third scale I used was the G sharp melodic minor scale because it has a nice biting quality and makes a great progressive turnaround sound. So let's refresh our memory. We were here. The G sharp melodic minor scale has A becomes A sharp, B is B, C is C sharp, D is D sharp, E is E sharp. Sorry about that. G is G. Beautiful sound. Got that beautiful run of whole steps. We've talked about this before. Let's hear how it plays out in the very first 4 chord sequence. Well, again, there's a little introduction. This is the G major, A to G. And when the marimba comes in, we go to E flat major. All those pitches shifted, some by just a half step, most of them by just a half step, some just stayed in place. Back to our original mode. Little melody on the top. We're going to talk about the rhythmic ideas in a second. And now here's the G sharp melodic minor. Do you hear that spooky sound? Gorgeous, right? And that was the first introduction. That was the introduction of the cycle. I think we can probably not look at the piano part anymore. And for the time being, probably not the winds. And I want to draw your attention to what's happening to destabilize and to make more interesting, honestly, this pattern. First of all, there's nothing that says the bass note, the lowest note in our voicing, has to be the root of the chord. In fact, it's kind of, in a way, more interesting when it's not. Let's take a look at the very first iteration. The bass note is an A. That A at the bottom creates the feeling of the Dorian mode. We talked about that right at the beginning. Now we're coming up to a shift here at bar 12. E flat major, but the bass note is A flat. And you can see a really interesting thing going on in the marimba part if you take a look at it. The repeated sort of interior tenor bass line is in groups of 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Against a sort of a pervasive sense of 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. In fact, the top of the marimba is 1, 2, 3, 4, while the bottom of the marimba is 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And that leads to a 6-measure cycle of the chords so that everything comes back by itself. And now, back to the A and the bass, and this little melody descending in groups of 3 again. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The bass note for the G sharp minor is B. It really creates quite a nice lift, doesn't it? So we've got a couple of different kinds of tension going on in this arrangement. First of all, the bass note is not necessarily the root of the major scale that I've chosen. And in fact, there's no reason that it has to be. There isn't. And the second is the difference between the groupings of 4 and the groupings of 3. The groupings of 3 in the melody, the groupings of 3 in the tenor part in the marimba, against the sort of sense of 4 in the piano. Later on in the piece, and just in probably the next cycle, I brought in a drum, solid, kind of a feeling of 4-4-4 on the floor. Well, that is kind of what's going on. And I've made some choices as I progress through the arrangement to do something which I think a lot of composers will do is once they've established the vocabulary, they'll start pulling things out. And it is terrific fun to have things go away. Here you can see I've pulled the melody out and the top of the marimba, yep. And then moving forward, I changed the way the melody works so that it descends and just sits there for a moment. At this point, I'm going to warn you the drums are in. And now that the melody just going down and up has really been established, I can play around with it a little bit. And so it never really exactly repeats until the very end. Well, what I'd like to do is go ahead and just play the piece for you. I've used a lovely woodwind patch that's just basically sustained winds. And the 16th note repetitions that you hear is the Sound Toys tremulator, just to give a really solid 16th note feel. Well, let's just run it from the top. E flat major over A flat. G major over A. G sharp melodic minor, kind of the third mode over the B. And now the drums come in and reorient us. Listen to the way the marimba works against the kick and snare. Now the E flat is in the bass against the, it's D sharp really, against the G sharp melodic minor. And then the whole thing starts again. We're not showing it, but the piano's still there, drumming away. We've got a B in the bass. That's the diminished, sort of the melodic minor sound. Well, it's a great trick. I don't know if it's a trick exactly, but there's a tool available to us to create harmonic motion and excitement. And that tool is right there in the DAW, but it's also in our imagination. The use of alternate bass notes besides the bass note, the root note of the scale, is a really powerful way to sort of twist and spin that note selection. And you know, that melody that you heard in the orange there, that was also being permuted in exactly the same way. It stuck to the same letter name pitches, but was adjusted to accommodate the scale. It's really the technique that I used for a number of the instrument parts here. The winds are fairly freely played to create a sense of ebb and flow, and the bass was kind of carefully calculated to destabilize things. Well, that's how I go about doing this, but it's by no means the only way. I hope this has been useful. And don't hesitate to try out stuff and see what happens. Well, I love the use of harmonic drumming. We're creating sonorities out of 7 tones all at once, and sometimes you get pretty strongly dissonant sounds. Like and subscribe and hit the bell. I mean, these days, you can miss a video unless you're notified, so go ahead and do it. Martin and I are announcing our holiday competition Friday or Saturday. We haven't decided exactly what day to drop the announcement yet. We did a recording conversation just yesterday morning. I'll see you next time.